Look at the hand resting in your lap. Look at the veins beneath the skin, the calcium in your fingernails, the iron tinting your blood red. You feel alive. You feel permanent. But if you were to ask an ancient priest from Babylon, or a Viking poet from Iceland, or a sage from ancient China where that matter came from, they would not tell you it was a gift. They would not tell you it was created from nothing. They would tell you the disturbing truth that lies at the foundation of nearly every great mythology on Earth. They would tell you that you are walking around inside a crime scene. For thousands of years, before we had telescopes or particle accelerators, humanity looked at the horizon and asked a single terrifying question. How did all of this get here? And for thousands of years, the answer was remarkably, uncomfortably consistent. The mountains are bones. The rivers are blood. The sky is a skull. The idea is known as cosmic dismemberment. It is the belief that the universe is not a machine, but a corpse. And to understand why we are here, we must understand who or what had to die to make room for us. To trace the origin of this bloody idea, we must go back 4,000 years to the mud brick temples of ancient Mesopotamia. This is the cradle of civilization. But the Babylonians did not see the world as a safe place. They lived in a land of violent floods and scorching heat. To them, order was a fragile island floating on a sea of chaos. They called that chaos Tiamat. In the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, Tiamat is the primordial mother goddess of the Salt Sea. She is vast, dragon-like, and terrifying. She represents the universe before structure, dark, watery, and swirling, but her children, the younger gods, want to build things. They want noise, light, and movement. Tiamat wants silence. The conflict is inevitable. It is not a debate, it is a war. The younger gods elect a champion, Marduk, the storm god. The text describes the battle with brutal cinematic precision. Marduk catches Tiamat in a net of winds. When she opens her mouth to scream, he drives the evil wind down her throat, so she cannot close her jaws. He fires an arrow that splits her heart. But the death of the monster is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of the world. Marduk stands over the massive, lifeless body of the mother goddess. He slices her corpse in half like a dried fish. With one half, he forms the roof of the sky to hold back the waters. With the other half, he forms the earth. He pierces her eyes, and from them flow the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the very water that irrigated the crops of Babylon. The message was clear to every citizen of the ancient world. The ground you walk on is a carcass. The water you drink is a tear from a dead god. Order can only be established by killing chaos. This might seem like a dark eccentricity of the Middle East until you travel 3,000 miles north to the frozen fjords of Scandinavia and find the exact same story. The Vikings lived in a world of ice and scarcity. Their mythology, recorded in the Pratic Edda, begins not with a bang, but with a thaw. In the beginning, there was only the Ginnungagap gap, a yawning void. From the meeting of fire and ice emerged Ymir, the first frost giant. Ymir was not a god. He was a force of nature, sleeping, sweating, and birthing monsters from his armpits. Just like in Babylonian, the younger god Odin and his brother Skuld not live in a world dominated by this massive, consuming entity. To create the world of men, the giant had to die. The murder of Ymir is described without apology. Odin and his brothers butchered the giant. The flow of blood was so massive it drowned almost the entire race of frost giants. Then, the grim construction began. They dragged Ymir's body into the center of the void. They used his flesh to make the land. They took his unbreakable bones and snapped them to create the mountains. They used his teeth and shattered bone fragments to make rocks and boulders. They took his skull, upturned it, and raised it high to create the dome of the sky. And finally, they took his brains and threw them into the air to create the drifting clouds. When a Viking looked up at a storm, he didn't just see weather. He saw the scattered thoughts of a dead giant. When he sailed the ocean, he was sailing on blood. Why? Why did these cultures, separated by vast distances and climates, agree that the world is a graveyard? Anthropologists suggest it comes from a fundamental observation of nature. Early humans were hunters and farmers. They knew a simple, brutal truth. Life eats life. You cannot survive unless something else dies. To eat a deer, you must kill it. To harvest wheat, you must cut it. To build a house, you must fell a tree. Existence is a transaction. If this rule applies to humans, surely it must apply to the gods. If the universe is alive, then it must have fed on something to grow. This theme echoes even in the East. In ancient Chinese mythology, there is the story of Pangu. In the beginning, the universe was a cosmic egg. Pangu slept inside it for 18,000 years. When he woke, he cracked the egg. The light became the sky, and the heavy parts became the earth. But Pangu's job was not done. He had to stand between them, pushing the sky up and the earth down, growing taller every day for another 18,000 years. Finally, exhausted by the labor of creation, Pangu died. But his death was not a murder. It was a sacrifice. As he collapsed, his breath became the wind and clouds. His voice became the thunder. His left eye became the sun, his right eye the moon. His blood became the rivers, and his muscles became the fertile land. Even the fleas on his skin, the myths say, became the common people. Here, the tone shifts from the violence of Babylon and the brutality of the Vikings to a sense of melancholy gratitude. Pangu gave everything he had, literally his own body, so that we could have a place to stand. For centuries, modern science dismissed these stories as savage superstitions. We told ourselves we knew better. We knew the universe wasn't made of blood and bones. It was made of hydrogen, helium, and carbon. We knew the Earth wasn't a corpse. It was a collection of geological processes. But then, in the 20th century, we pointed our most powerful telescopes into the deep darkness. We began to understand the life cycle of stars. And in a twist that no one saw coming, the astrophysicists realized that the priests were right all along. The universe is quite literally a graveyard of giants. Consider the iron in your blood, the hemoglobin that carries oxygen to your brain right now. Consider the calcium in your teeth. Consider the gold in your wedding ring. None of these elements were created at the Big Bang. The Big Bang produced only the simplest gases, hydrogen and helium. A universe made only of those two things is a cold, dark, gas-filled room. There are no planets. There are no rocks. There is no life. So where did the heavy stuff come from? It came from the giants, massive primordial stars, millions of times larger than our sun. These stars burned with a furious heat, fusing atoms together in their cores. Alchemy on a cosmic scale. They turned hydrogen into helium, helium into carbon, carbon into neon, oxygen, silicon, and finally, iron. But once a star creates iron, it is doomed. The fire goes out. Gravity wins. The star collapses inward in a fraction of a second, and then explodes with the power of 1 billion nuclear bombs. A supernova. In that violent death and that cosmic murder, the star rips itself apart. It blasts all those heavy elements, all that carbon and oxygen and iron, out into the void. These massive clouds of star guts drift through the galaxy. Eventually, gravity pulls them back together. They condense. They form a new solar system. They form a rocky planet. They form water. They form you. Every single atom in your body, other than the hydrogen, was cooked inside the belly of a star that had to die before you could exist. When the Babylonians said the earth was made from the corpse of Tiamat, they were speaking in metaphors, but they were chemically correct. When the Vikings said the rocks were the teeth of Ymir, they were touching on a physical reality. The rocky crust of our planet is composed of heavy elements that could only be forged in the death throes of a stellar giant. We are not separate from the universe. We are recycled parts of it. We are the afterlife of stars. This scientific reality brings a profound weight to the ancient myths. It suggests that the intuition of our ancestors was sharper than we give them credit for. They looked at the cycle of nature the way a fallen log feeds the moss, the way a carcass feeds the soil, and they extrapolated it to the heavens. They understood that you cannot get something for nothing. There is a strange comfort in this. If the universe is a corpse, then death is not the opposite of life. Death is the construction material of life. The story of Pangu, the giant who died of exhaustion to build the world, becomes a story about the suns that burned themselves out to create the carbon in our DNA. The violence of Marduk killing Tiamat becomes the violence of the supernova, the explosion that scatters the seeds of creation. So, look at your hand again. You are looking at a relic. You are a monument to a generation of stars that perished billions of years ago. You are the resolution to a conflict that started in the dark. The ancient myths remind us that we are part of a lineage. We are here because something else gave way. We are the beneficiaries of a cosmic sacrifice. And perhaps the only way to repay that debt is to understand it. To look up at the night sky not just with wonder, but with gratitude. The silence of space is not empty. It is a stillness after the violence. It is the quiet at a cathedral built from the bones of the past. And for a brief moment, we are the ones who get to open our eyes and witness it. The universe may be a corpse, but it is the most beautiful death imaginable. And we are the life that rose from the ashes.